Today we are going to talk about piercing and cutting, which is a portion of your first jewelry assignment. As you can see on the intro slide, our essential question is, why is piercing an essential jewelry making skill? What is essential to know about piercing and cutting? And what are the safety precautions you should take while piercing and cutting? Remember, the Cornell notes are there for you to use so you can reference them during the safety quizzes. We do practice with Kahoots, but you only get one chance to do each quiz, so taking notes is always a good idea. They will help you remember well. Taking notes will also help you make less mistakes on your work. Remember, while this is a school assignment, the work in this class is jewelry that you'll eventually get to wear, sell, or give to other people. So if it were me, I would want it to look really great. It's up to you to pay attention during each class in order to make that happen. Our learning targets for this assignment are being able to create a pierced piece that has enamel on it. Additionally, we'll want to make sure we are following safety protocols to protect ourselves and others. We also need to know what tools are called and how they are used in order to create jewelry. Some of you might think that wearing safety glasses makes you look dorky, but they are an essential part of keeping safe during each class. Additionally, you should tie long hair back when using any power equipment in order to protect yourself from harm. The next slide is a bit graphic, so brace yourself. I feel the need to show you saw blades and drill bits in people's eyes to make sure that you realize your reaction time for blinking and the speed in which a broken piece go flying do not match. Don't take the risk. Just wear the safety glasses. Also, right now we are most concerned with hair being tied back in order to prevent it from being pulled out with a Dremel. But there are also processes that could burn your hair. Not only does hair need to be tied back, but you also need to pay attention to where your body is so you aren't so close to something hot that you burn yourself. Stretching is also important. As we cut and file, we are concentrating a lot and tensing muscles. So it's important to understand what stretch will help alleviate any soreness from working. This is also why the stools are so short in here. The stools help us sit straight up while we cut so we don't get backaches due to bad posture. It's also better to be close to what you're cutting because the pieces are so small, it's easier to see what you're doing when your face is close to the work. Here we're moving on to the tools we'll need for piercing and cutting. This slide shows the saw frame, saw blades, and bench pin that are used in combination while we cut metal for jewelry. The saw frame obviously holds the blade that cuts the metal, and the bench pin is where the piece is placed while cutting. Another set of tools needed are the Dremel tool in the Dremel press in conjunction with a drill bit. When the drill bit is in the Dremel tool, it can be used to create a hole necessary for cutting the piercings we will be creating in our designs. Additionally, the Dremel wrench helps take the drill bit or any other bit we use in the Dremel in and out of the tool. You also need to be aware of the cord reels and the plug of each power tool we use. The plug is what should be used to attach and remove the cord of any power tool from an outlet. Tugging the cord could cause the cord to come apart and either cause electrocution or damage to the tool so it no longer works. Before you can use a Dremel tool, you'll need to use a center punch and a ball peen hammer in order to create a place for the drill to go when you want to pierce metal. The wax you see on this slide is used both for drilling and cutting in order to lubricate the parts that make them work more efficiently. Just so you are aware, eventually drill bits and saw blades break and will need to be replaced, so you have to know how to put them in the tools in which they belong. The steel block and anvil you see here are used to put the metal on when using the center punch with a ball peen hammer. They should be located on the anvil table in the back of the room. We always create practice pieces so you have more success with each project we create. So you'll have a small piece that you will cut and another that will be used to practice enamel to help ensure the success of your final product. We will be using copper for this first piece. As you can see on this slide, the copper metal is orange or brown in color. Don't let that worry you. We will be enameling during this assignment, which means that orange will change to a different color as you add enamel. While we have you practice techniques, it's important to work carefully each day so you don't make careless mistakes. If a mistake happens, we can sometimes correct it, so please speak to the instructor to help you problem solve solutions to what happens if you have a problem cutting. Before we discuss how to cut, you need to be aware of the requirements of the first assignment. There is a link in the header of this slide to the assignment we will be working on, but you can also see the requirement lists right here. Number 1 is that you have to have 10 piercings. Number 2 is the piece has to be structurally sound. Number 3 is the use of repetition and variation. Remember, those are principles of design we had talked about. Number 4 is that it has to fit on a 2x2 piece of copper. Number 5 is it should be personally meaningful to you or something that you love. I always assign this because that way you like what you're actually working on. Number 6 is it has to have fine craftsmanship, which means there can be no problems when the piece is finished. Number 7 is it has to be enameled, which means it will have color on it. And number 8 is it has to be functional so that the piece can be worn. Each project will have limitations, not because your instructor doesn't want you to be able to create what you want, but because the materials used in each assignment have limitations to how they can be used. For this particular assignment, you are only allowed to create pendants and earrings because we will be enameling. As you can see, the enamel has to be fired flat or the enamel powder will melt off the piece. There are earring and pendant shapes that are in the piercing and cutting module, and there should be examples in the classroom you can use as well to start designing your work. As we finish each project, we will be using baggies to turn them in physically so that they can be displayed. Sometimes the work will also be wrapped in cloth to protect it from scratches. You will also be putting your work in your locker, which you should lock at the end of each class. All right, now we're going to talk about how to create the sketches for your work. As you know, one of our department power standards is to create a game plan for how you will go about making your work. In addition to your sketches, you will have to combine parts of all the presentations and videos to make the piece work. Part of your game plan in each assignment will be creating steps for how you will accomplish the work. You will not be given medal until the sketches and steps are completed and submitted. The next few slides show you some examples of the initial circle assignment and what the images can look like when cut. We start with lines, moving to combining shapes, and then eventually combine complex shapes so our designs resemble real-world objects. In order to create things from the natural world, you may need to put images from your phone or Google into your Drive account and print them out using the computers in B119. We will then trace the items to create shapes and make the design look similar in metal. It's always important to choose about 5 images so you have options in case something is too difficult right now for you to do. While tracing is normally discouraged, in jewelry it is often necessary to trace or even use graph paper to make designs specific enough to work out. It is important to point out that you should not copy something blatantly. Changing aspects to make it your own is important as your integrity as an artist, and also mean that your instructor can enter your work in art competitions that happen throughout the year. As you create sketches, you will also have to use the millimeter ruler from your toolkit because the metal between the piercings has to be 2 millimeters. If you don't adhere to this rule, you may end up with piercings that join together, creating a shape that no longer looks like the object you were trying to create. Here you can see this piece looks like a rose because the person appropriately spaced their piercings. Another thing that will help you create a more successful piece is filling in the shapes you are going to cut out, or the negative shapes, with a Sharpie marker. Some of you may even find it helpful to fill in the space around your design, like the image on the lower right, so you can see all of what you are cutting away. Remember, the black parts are what we are trying to cut out. This next part describes the process and is some of what you will need to create your steps, so pay attention. Once you have your design ready to go, the first thing you want to do is copy and print the page from your sketchbook and glue it on the 2x2 piece of copper the teacher will give you. The scissors and glue sticks should be located in one of the shared tool cabinets under the presentation screen. Make sure you conserve metal by putting your design as close to the edge of the metal as possible. It saves money. You should also go and get safety glasses, then clean them if they are dirty, and get ready for piercing. Next, you have to create a seat for the drill bit because the second step is to drill holes in the center of the black shapes you will be cutting out of the inside of the piece. We will always start cutting in the center of the piece in order to keep the metal as structurally sound as possible when cutting. Again, we are cutting in the middle of the black shape. This is showing the middle of a piece, but not the middle of a piercing. You will now have to use a Dremel tool to drill the holes. It's important to understand how to load and unload the Dremel so you can keep working if a drill bit breaks. Taking the Dremel out of the press with the large silver wrench and then using the small wrench to change the bit when necessary. First, you need to press the blue button near the chuck and point the tool at you. Then turn the wrench to the left as the tool is pointed at you and loosen the bit. Put the new bit in, tighten the chuck by pressing the same blue button and turning the wrench to the right to tighten the bit. A little saying to remember how to tighten and loosen tools is righty-tighty, leftsy-loosey. There's a video for how to use the Dremel wrench as well, so that when this happens to you, you can watch the video if the instructor is working with someone else. Just so you are aware, after many people use the same drill bit, it will get dull and eventually break. The same happens with saw blades. Again, the wax will help lubricate the parts, making them last longer, but eventually these very small tools will break. You can see the person in this slide clamped their piece down so it doesn't move. You can also hold it with your fingers. Once you have all the holes pierced, you can get a saw frame from the shared tool cabinet and go back to your assigned seat to start cutting. You will need the saw blades from your toolkit. You will need to make sure that the saw blades are facing out and down. There are several toggles that tighten and loosen the saw. Use those to put the blade in the saw frame. The blade should be put in the handle end first. Then thread the blade through the middle piercing in your design and tighten the blade. Remember, you will need to make sure that there is about an eraser's amount of space between the edge of the saw blade and the saw frame so there is enough tension on the saw for it to work. It may take a little practice for this to work, but you will soon get the hang of it, so don't give up. As you cut, there are a few things in which you need to be aware so you have greater success. Number 1 is to make sure that the blade is in the middle of the bench pin as you cut. The closer you are to the tip of the V that is cut out of the bench pin, the easier it will be to use. The saw blade has to be perfectly straight up and down to work, perpendicular to the ceiling. Lubricate the blade with wax and slowly saw up and down the entire length of the blade. Do not push the blade. The up and down motion will be enough to cut. As a reminder, you should be starting in the center and working your way toward the outer edge of the shape, as this will make the piece more structurally sound as you work. As you are cutting, you should be cutting on the waist side of the line. This means trying to stay away from the white parts of your design and in the black parts. What this does is create a little more metal for you later on when you are filing and helps you make less mistakes. 2 types of shapes you need to be aware of when cutting are circles and triangles. When cutting a circle, you start in the center and spiral your way out because it will cut the shape perfectly. If you try to go perpendicular to the edge and then have to turn the blade, you could either break the blade or cut past the shape that you want to. When cutting a triangle, start in the center and then arc your way as you move to one of the points. Then back the blade up, start from the same center hole, and cut to the other side of that triangle point in order to make that point cut out. Then you would repeat those steps until all 3 points of the triangle are finished. Remember to turn the metal as you are cutting up and down. If you try to turn your piece while you're not moving, the blade will break. There are different size saw blades for different processes. Right now you should have the correct saw blades for what you're doing, but it's important to be aware of this because thicker metal needs thicker blades. Right now you'll only be able to write your steps for cutting, but soon we will be talking about filing and sanding as well as the enameling process. When we get to those processes, you will be adding steps to what you're creating right now. There will be about 6 additional steps added to what you know now before your piece is complete. As a reminder for what the sketches should look like, the black parts are the negative spaces that we will be cutting out. The white parts are the metal that will be left as your pendant or earrings. The key in the design process is to use objects from the natural world that you love so you really like what you're working on. This not only guarantees a higher rate of success, but will be more fun for you while you're working as well. You should now be able to answer the essential question from the beginning and start creating your first design.